Ingenuity and diversionary tactics are part and parcel of Ukraine's effort to win the war against Russia. This includes producing fake tanks and artillery pieces to trick the Russians into using their valuable real weapons to destroy Ukrainian decoys. But just who is behind making the fakes that are saving the real items from destruction?
An M777 howitzer destroyed by Russian fire, except that it's not a real howitzer, but rather a model. These fake Western artillery pieces are made by volunteers. They're decoys, meant to fool Russian soldiers into wasting expensive munitions to destroy them. The Russians see the fake artillery from drones and cannot distinguish the model from real weapons. Proper camouflage also plays a role.
The military showed me how the fakes look on the Russian screens. We used to create more detailed models, but the military told me they don't need all this. The main thing is to have the basic elements. And there's more than enough detail here for how they see this stuff.
Ruslan used to make furniture. A year ago, he received a request from the military to make models of weapons. He made his own drawings based on photos from the internet.
We've already made more than 100 models. One real howitzer costs at least $3 million. So we've already saved about $300 million for our army.
A fake howitzer costs about $1,000, while the Russian projectile that destroys it costs $35,000.
This is what fascinates us, that we can do something here, in civilian life, that really helps the army, helps to save the guys.
Here, craftsmen are working on a model of a Soviet-era artillery piece. It's made of plywood, tin sheets and scrap metals. This is the finished product, a cannon almost 10 meters long. The model has enough detail to be indistinguishable from a real cannon when seen from a drone. Mikhailo is a second-generation carpenter. What he wants most is for the products he has worked on to be destroyed as soon as possible.
If the Russians watch from drones, and it looks like a real one, there will be airstrikes. More strikes on our fake weapons mean more lives saved for our military, so that they don't have to take risks. The more airstrikes, the better.
These craftsmen can make models of Western radars and even the German Iris-T air defense system. Ukrainian veteran and military analyst Alexei Hetman emphasizes that it is necessary to keep a balance between the resources spent and their effectiveness.
If they start creating special units and allocating a large number of people and forces to do this, it won't be worth it. The models work, but they don't protect 100% against enemy attacks. They can confuse the enemy sometimes, and that's okay. That is, if even one missile hits the dummy that costs hundreds or thousands of dollars, it's already a success.
These Ukrainian engineering units don't disclose which models they use and where. But they want to generate as much support as possible to continue their work.
Let's bring in Frank Ledwidge here. He's a senior lecturer in strategic studies at Portsmouth University and a former UK military intelligence officer. Frank, how widespread is the use of decoy weaponry in modern warfare?
Good afternoon. There's a long and noble history of this kind of deception, going way back, way beyond the Second World War, but notably in the Second World War. The British and Americans managed to create an entire army of inflatable and wooden tanks, which deceived the Germans into misplacing the D-Day invasion. In my time, we in NATO were seriously discomforted by the Serbian efforts at deception, very much along the lines of what you saw there in your report, to the effect that when we went to do battle damage assessment in Kosovo, expecting 400 Serbian tanks to be destroyed, we found 4. So in terms of the cost benefit, as the analyst said there, indeed ran through the whole report, this is absolutely Well, it's not fundamental. It's a really important element of modern warfare and quite a covert one. And as was said there, it's not just artillery pieces. It's across the board. You can create wooden headquarters or anti-aircraft systems, radar sets. There's a limit to it, though, and I think now we're getting to the point where high-definition TV footage can challenge the kind of efforts being made there. But certainly, they're very important.
What's your assessment, Frank, of the tactical advantages provided by these decoys?
Well, they can be used in many ways. So let me give you an example. There's all kinds of nuances in this. So let's say you create your inflatable tank. Well, a good analyst, a good photo analyst, will be able to tell the fake from the real one, not just by the way it looks, and that's quite difficult actually, but also by the detritus around it, the tracks, because of course any tank or artillery system has to get there. So what tends to be done is the clever deployments of these items will probably put them where previously there'd been a tank or a gun. So it's surrounded by the detritus of an artillery team or indeed a tank crew, the fuel cans or the artillery shells, which will, of course, look very real. And you can add to that by having dummies or mannequins as well. If you want to be really nuanced about it, you have a tank and you'll place an infrared source in it to mimic the engine, perhaps an old diesel generator or something like that. So all this has been done in the past. So there's a lot of nuance behind this. What the Russians have been doing apparently is, because they do this as well, needless to say, on both sides, is they will deploy a fake unit or asset in a certain place for a number of days, and it'll be determined as a fake. They'll put a real one there then and use it to ambush any Ukrainian attack on that. So there's all sorts of nuances and ways you can use this. Very effective. And the Ukrainians have been really good at this throughout the war.
Now, duping the enemy, confusing them, deceiving them, as you put it, these tactics have been around for a long time. Can you give us some examples that go beyond decoys of artillery or just things in the field? Yes.
So let's take as an example HIMARS systems. You saw a similar looking truck there being made. It was an Iris T. But the Ukrainians and indeed companies in Czech Republic and elsewhere make these things by the dozen. And one particular manufacturer turns out a couple of dozen HIMARS, fake HIMARS units a month. And the Russians declared halfway through, I think, last year that they had taken down, they killed, they destroyed 22 HIMARS launchers. The fact is they've maybe done one or two.
Okay.
And we know that because at that time, the Ukrainians only had 16.
Okay. Frank, thank you very much. Our military analyst, Frank Ledwidge there.
Thank you.
Well, I'm joined now by military analyst Marina Miron from the War Studies Department at King's College in London. Marina, it's good to see you again. How common is the use of decoy weaponry in modern warfare?
Good evening, Brent. Well, what we have to understand about decoys, as Sun Tzu said some more than 2,000 years ago, that all warfare is about deception. So I would argue that decoys, or as the Russians refer to it, maskirovka, is an essential part of warfare, especially for both Ukrainian and Russian forces who come from this tradition of using decoys in different fields in electromagnetic spectrum, also physical decoys, as we have seen in the report. So it is very important.
And Marina, do we know of any cases where decoys have been decisive in diverting enemy attention away from genuine targets?
Well, there are a couple of cases in Ukraine. So one from the Russian side was placing decoy trenches in Zaporizhia and then luring the Ukrainian forces essentially to these trenches. And for the Ukrainian side, they have been using decoys throughout. For instance, decoys on an airfield depicting a Su-25 jet bombed by Russians, wasting a lot of money. So both sides have used quite a lot of different techniques from capes that Russian reconnaissance uses in order not to be detected, because these capes protect their bodies and basically prevent them from emitting heat, so they cannot be seen at night. And so we have seen quite a lot going on in this war, and both sides have used quite similar tactics when it comes to decoy, because it's all about information superiority, confusing your enemy, giving them the false impression, smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, these smoke and mirrors, these tactics, as you say, they've been around a very long time. Can you give us some examples that go beyond artillery decoys?
Well, of course, we should be thinking about this broadly. For instance, GPS spoofing is also a way of creating a decoy, because you manipulate essentially the information. And another example, which one might not associate with a military operation, for instance, is a fake video of Zelensky, deep fake video saying to his troops they should lay down arms. So that's a decoy. It's basically about manipulating the information that's available to your adversary.
Military analyst Marina Miron, as always, we appreciate your time and your insights. Marina, thank you.
Thank you for having me.